to kick off up here. So welcome to the November meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Brian Morby, Chair of the committee. On my left is Richard Lewis, who's the Head of Development Management, or something like that. And next to him is Paul Wheeldon, who's the Head of Transportation. On my right is Rachel Beale, who's minute taker. On her right, Tim James, who is the Assistant Chief Legal Officer, who will be advising the panel, the committee with regard to declarations of interest and any other legal issues which might arise. Over there on the right is Rob Murray, who's in the planning department, and Adrian Wilcox down here, and Helen Smith, who are also planners, principal planners indeed. We are being, and Norman Jones at the dais over there, who's also team leader of the in the planning department. The meeting is being recorded, but because of a technical problem, it will not be webcast live. So apologies for all of you who are looking at this tomorrow and weren't able to watch it live. But technology sometimes is not our friend. Firstly, then, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies that members would like to give? Rachel, have you had any?
Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Keith James and Councillor Wayne Tomlinson.
And that's probably it, isn't it, I think? Okay, if you can make sure you assign the attendance book which is circulating, and also within that book declare or write in your declaration of interest, which takes me nicely into item 2, which is for Tim to advise the committee on declarations of interest. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to remind members, if they have any declarations, if they could record those in the register, please. I'm aware of the following declarations, members. In relation to items 5 and 6 on the agenda, planning applications concerning Cwmbran and Old Cwmbran respectively, Councillor Powell, I anticipate you'll wish to declare a personal-only interest as a member of the Cwmbran Community Council who were consultees. Is that correct, Councillor Powell?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Ashley, I anticipate you're in a similar position on those two items where Cwmbran Community Council were consulted. Do you wish to declare a personal-only interest on that basis? Thank you very much. I'm not aware of any other declarations, members. Just for your information, item 7, which concerns an application in Pontypool but is dealing merely with the discharge of condition, I'm informed by the relevant officers that there wasn't any consultation with the Pontypool Community Council in relation to that. That's why I don't anticipate any declarations in relation to that one. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Tim. Before we proceed to the next item, can I just give a reminder to all members of the committee about an email which you may have had a week or two ago concerning a free planning training workshop which will be taking place next Tuesday from 5:30 to 8:30 in meeting room 1 at the Pontypool Active Living Centre. This is intended mainly for community council members, but I'd be grateful if those of you who are community council members could A, consider going along, but B, remind your colleagues on the community councils about it, because I understand the number of people who put their names down for this is relatively few. And of course, planning committee members, whether community councillors or not, are also invited to this training workshop. And indeed, if you were able to go, then you might find it helpful to you in terms of understanding your role in relation to discharging your functions. So, reminder, 24th, 5:30 to 8:30 in meeting room 1 in the Pontypool Active Living Centre. Next is item 3. The minutes of the Planning Committee held on the 13th of October. I'll go through the pages for accuracy Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. And page 11. You're happy to accept those as a true record as proposed by Councillor Seaborn? As that seconded? Councillor Waite, thank you. Everybody happy with that? Good, thanks very much. Are there any issues in those minutes which members wish to ask questions about? I'll take your silence as no. Okay. We'll move on then to item 4, which is a report backlog of planning applications, and Richard Lewis will say a few words about that.
Thank you, Chair. Well, members will be aware that we've been looking to try and improve performance in the way that we deal with planning applications, and we've done various seminars and put reports out for that. As part of that improvement, we need to be able to deal with our backlog of planning applications. There's quite a few that are quite old and are lying dormant because we're waiting for information or it's just gone quiet for some reason. So this report, we can dispose of applications through the planning regulations. So we've always been able to do that, but we haven't really had a formal process for doing it. So this report is for information only to demonstrate to members what we're going to be doing, the approach we're going to be following with the older applications, but in so doing, being reasonable in that approach. As I say, it's for information only, but I'm hoping that members will just endorse that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Any questions? Councillor Crick?
Thank you, Chair. Richard, if I could ask, do you have any time frame by which time you expect this to be completed, and what sort of impact does it have on your manpower, given that you are a small unit?
It is going to have an impact. We are hoping that we'll be able to complete this exercise within the next 6 months. Whatever happens, we have to do it because part of the new planning performance framework is looking at the average time to deal with planning applications. Now, if we are pulling applications, the longer they go on for, the bigger that average time will be. So we have to address it, and we've chosen to do it now. As I say, about 6 months, we're hoping we can complete that process.
Okay, any other questions or comments? You happy to note the report? Thank you very much. Okay, can we move on then to item 5, which is the planning application 15/P/00153, which relates to development on the former police college. Helen Smith will make a presentation in respect of it.
Thank you, Chair. The application that we're looking at today relates to the former police training college. This part of the site forms as part of the wider allocation in the LDP for 350 dwellings. This site relates to the brownfield element of the site, with the exception of the former playing fields here. Full application in front of us today. Originally, the application submitted was for 224 dwellings, but through negotiations with the developer to overcome various issues, it's now been reduced down to 219. We have, if I just go through the layout with you, this is Green Meadow Way, and here is the main access through the site, leading into the main part of the site. It does allow for future development, future access at 2 points into the remainder of the allocated site. We have various forms of streets and cul-de-sacs throughout the development. As you can see here, there's an entrance feature proposed of a crescent of detached properties of varying styles surrounding these 2 green open areas. The areas will also be used to accommodate the underground attenuation tanks and storage crates for the drainage proposal for the site. Up in this location here, the former playing field, the recreation area is proposed to be sited. It's a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom detached terraced semi-detached properties and there are 3 apartment blocks. These street scenes show the street scenes for various parts of the site. As you can see, the different types of properties proposed, and here are some other street scenes. This is a CGI image produced by the applicant to demonstrate how this entrance feature will look. This is Green Meadow Way here. Here we have the 2 open spaces with a tree-lined access road. The recreation facilities provided on the site, as I said previously, will be sited on the previous playing field. The playing field hasn't been used for a number of years. Aerial photos show that it wasn't in use since 2004. As a result, it's regenerated into MG5 grassland. The applicant proposes to site the recreation facilities in this location to help address to help serve the remainder of the site, and also to create a balance between protection of the MG5 on the site, plus also compensating for the loss of the playing field. Full details haven't been approved or submitted at this stage. We have secured a Section 106 agreement, and through that process, full details of all the equipment. This will be a junior play area here, some adventure play and some adult multi-gym facilities in these locations. Management of these areas and maintenance of them will be by a management company funded by the developer initially, which then be funded by a roof tax served by the properties on the site. All that would be secured, and more details would be required as part of the Section 106 agreement. There's no approved development framework as part of this wider allocation, but the applicant has submitted a draft development framework to indicate how it could potentially be developed in the future. The application we're dealing with today is for the brownfield element, which then leaves future phases to be considered at a different time when a subsequent planning application would be submitted. This application demonstrates that it won't preclude or prevent any future development, but the details and the layout and the general principles will have to be for the remainder of the site will have to be considered at a later date. We have some photographs of the site. This is the main access into the site from Green Meadow Way. Inside the site, as you can see, the majority of the buildings have now been demolished and cleared. Looking down Green Meadow Way, this hedge row is proposed to be retained with the properties behind it. There will be some footpath links created in the middle. We have Salisbury's Court. This hedgerow is also proposed to be retained. There is a pedestrian footpath proposed in this location to improve the permeability of the site. Here we have a Salisbury's Court again. This is the boundary of the site. This area here is proposed to be cleared and a 1.8 metre fence to be put on the boundary. Here we have Uplands Terrace on St Giles Road. This is the site here. There's a significant hedge line separating St Giles Road and the application site. There are 3 points where footpath access are proposed and help permeability and provide sustainable forms of transport down into the town. We are seeking to protect this hedgerow as well. And here we have photographs of the former playing field, which, as you can see, has now regenerated sensitive grasslands. Two issues that need to be updated since the report went into a print. Education had originally sought contributions for education places within the... However, further discussions have taken place and they have verbally confirmed that following further consideration of school capacity in the area and in the light of the current SVG guidance, we accept that no contribution can be sought in this instance. We also propose a few amendments to some of the conditions which are in your report. Condition 4 requires a noise assessment to be carried out to ensure the proposed residents are adequately protected against noise from Green Meadow Way. We propose to clarify in that condition that only relates to the proposed properties adjacent to Green Meadow Way. We propose an additional condition which specifically protects the hedge along St Giles Road, although it's shown on the approved on the proposed landscaping scheme. We feel that it's necessary to add an extra layer of protection. And we also propose some additional comments were received from a ward member following the removal of the basins within the green spaces. Concerns of children playing in these green spaces and their safety in terms of running across the main access road. So we feel that a condition is appropriate to ensure a scheme to be submitted in terms of the boundary treatment, so we can ensure that appropriate boundary treatments are provided to have an acceptable visual impact, as well as to ensure that adequate safety is provided. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now we have two speakers for this particular item, external to the committee. The first is Mr. John Mussell, and the second is Councillor Elizabeth Haynes. Mr. Mussell, if you could come down, please, into the chamber. And you can't see me at the moment. I'll wait for you to come in. Welcome, Mr. Mussell. If you could take a seat there, make yourself comfortable. You will have 5 minutes to speak, and that's fairly strictly timed by my colleague, Mr. James, there, so he'll let you know when time is up. Okay, it starts now.
Thank you, councillors, planners, members, for giving me this opportunity to speak. You can tell by the way, this is all I'm saying, and I will stick largely to what I've written. You can tell by the way I talk that I'm not a local. My wife and I have lived in our present home in Salisbury Court in Cwmbran for 10 years. I unofficially represent the residents of Salisbury Court after having raised a petition on the 3rd of August this year expressing concerns on the possible adverse impact that the new estate might have on us. May I have the second picture of the plan, please? No, the plan.
Oh, the plan, sorry.
I just wanted to show the wedge-shaped area that brings, sorry, it's taking a long time to get back. There we are. The wedge in this bottom centre is the Salisbury Court area, and that is the road around the boundary separating the new estate from the existing estate. And that corner near the apex of the wedge is a tight corner, and it has for years been declared by residents to be dangerous. I don't know if they have expressed this to the council or whether that's just information that comes in passing. We've been pleased to note, since we raised our objections, that the planners and developers have assisted our cause in 3 ways. First, by repositioning the proposed exit path of the new estate away from the Salisbury Court Road. We were worried about the safety of that. Second, by reassuring us that the new estate will be fenced off from the Salisbury Court Road. That is as I'm looking at there, the northeast straight line, which worried us a bit. Third, by agreeing to a reduction in the number of residences in the new estate overall. We appreciate the hard work that's gone into planning and the willingness of the developer to take on a brown site. We also appreciate the reduction in housing density that will surely affect, and I mean the full development, not just this one. Will adversely affect their bottom line, the developer's bottom line, but will preserve a large amount of green area, larger than before, and reduce overload on local services. We have some remaining concerns. There appear to be too few visitors parking places in the new estate. The closest alternative parking for visitors would be along the Salisbury Court Road. This would not be welcomed by Salisbury Court residents, as the road would become more unsafe than as at present, since the road is narrow. If we may see the photograph again, please. It has a known and documented dangerous bend. The footpath on the bend is narrow. I'll just hang on a moment. That footpath is too narrow, for instance, for a wheelchair, and on the right-hand side there is nothing, and that goes all the way down. I didn't quite hear whether a footpath is now planned on that northeastern straight line, that side, whether there's so much vegetation. No. Okay. There is no further footpath down that road. And with the vegetation encroachment on the north side, it would be a problem if people who lived in or visited the new estate tried to park in places there.
30 seconds more, Mr. Mussell, okay?
Right. The residents ask, therefore, that this issue be addressed by measures such as double yellow lines, resident reserve parking, or an enforceable notice restricting the road residents and their visitors. Also, on Green Meadow Way, no planning appears to have been made, which this will affect Salisbury Court residents, to facilitate safe traffic flow out and into the new estate and into Salisbury Court and in the area. Further, there appears to be no arrangement for a pedestrian crossing onto the south side bus stops. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mussell. If you care to take your seat back in the gallery, and ask Councillor Haynes if you would care to come down. Ready? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I'll keep this very brief because most of my comments you've read and have seen in the report. They're quite extensive and they reiterate much of what Mr. Mussell has said to you today. The reason that I've asked to speak today really is, in addition to the points already, is that I must mention the lack of the second access road that was originally in the LDP. I understand that the developers have submitted a traffic impact assessment that negates the need for one, but this council, in its LDP, the planning inspector, they clearly had that second entrance in its determinations. It saddens me that the vision agreed by council and the planning inspector can be so easily ignored or pushed aside. In years to come, especially when Phase 2 and Phase 3 are built, the excessive burden on the road network will land clearly back on the council's shoulders to fund. So basically my request to committee is to consider that point carefully before making your determination here today. I'd also like to thank the officers and the developers for the work that they've done in working towards getting some of the other issues resolved before bringing it to committee. Thank you.
Before I throw it open for debates, I am going to ask Helen and Paul if they wish to make any observations on the points that have been raised by Mr Mussell and Councillor Haynes.
In terms of the boundary adjacent to Salisbury's Court, we have proposed a condition to prevent any pedestrian or vehicle access being created from that area, which would prevent any loss of any existing parking spaces for residents on Salisbury's Court and on other issues.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If firstly I could pick up on some of the points made by Mr Mussell. You can see Salisbury Court there. It's probably a 1970s, early 80s housing site. And very often at that period they did build estates without footways. They called them shared surface roads. We've had no particular issues with Salisbury Court from a traffic management point. And this development, I note the comment was made that there is a shortage of visitor spaces within the site, but I've argued that point within my report. You'll see in my comments I'm probably on version 3, where there was a shortage of car parking, and there was particularly a shortage of visitor parking, and each time we tried to encourage them to provide more visitor parking. The final plan I was satisfied with. There was a shortfall of some parking within the properties, but we could tolerate that because they showed on-street parking bays, and if you totaled up all the space that was necessary for parking, you had enough space there if you took on-street parking within that figure that we took. So generally there's sufficient car parking within that site and sufficient visitor parking, so there should be no real need for those visitors to overspill onto Salisbury Court, particularly given that there will be no entrances or rear accesses onto Salisbury Court. It would be quite a detour for any resident to walk up Green Meadow Way into the site, into the development site, if they park their car in Salisbury Court. So I can't see that as a particular problem. Mr Mussell talked about, again, no pedestrian crossing on Green Meadow Way, across to the bus stops. What we did, if I could just give you members a bit of background on this, and this will link into Councillor Haynes' question as well. I spend a lot of time on this trying to get the developer to provide secondary access into the site. It was in the LDP, but it wasn't raised as a big issue by the inspector. It was just shown. The inspector didn't really mention it, so it was never really an issue. I spent a long time trying to encourage the developer to provide that secondary access. They put forward lots of information as to why it shouldn't be provided, linking that information to current highway guidance that we have. And I have to say, there is nothing in any highway guidance to say that that access would have been absolutely essential. It would have been nice to have, but it is not seen as an essential part of that development. So I was faced where we were in a situation where, do I object to this planning application on the basis that there's no secondary access? And with all the guidance that was there, I felt that I wouldn't be in a very strong position there in opposing this application because there was no secondary access. So what I did, I changed my position. But what I got in changing that position was a system of traffic calming from the existing traffic calming on Green Meadow Way up to the junction, which would encourage people then to exit the site, go uphill and down Green Forge Way into town, rather than travel down the residential area of Green Meadow Way. So what that did in effect was also give us an opportunity to look at the bus laybys and the footway linkages to the bus laybys and get improvements to that from the contribution that the developer is giving us for the calming. So I felt that it would have been, if you take the secondary access, would have been, can you show me on that plan, Helen, where the secondary access, it would have gone in there. and it's not a significant detour from the existing access to where that secondary access would have been. So I felt that the traffic calming and the benefits that the community would also get from that would be justified, because we didn't ask for continue with the secondary access. If I could perhaps pick up on no pedestrian crossing, Mr. Mussell mentioned as well. We don't generally tend to put in pedestrian crossings. It's got to hit certain criteria in that there's got to be significant numbers of people crossing the road and significant numbers of vehicles passing that side. My view is that you probably wouldn't reach the figure that is necessary for a pedestrian crossing there. The other thing there as well is that we would put in better footway links in to the bus stop, so that all helps in the general environment. You don't necessarily have to put pedestrian crosses in every site that you build. You know, it has to meet certain criteria. I think that was all, Chair.
Thanks very much. Well, hang on a second, Stuart. Thank you very much. I'm going to open this for debate and discussion and for any questions. Could I also draw members' attention to the notes of the site meeting, which are also part of your papers. So, Councillor Ashley.
Sorry about that. I need to make a further declaration. I hadn't realised there was a comment in there by Torvine Friends of the Earth, of which I'm a signed up member. Can I make a declaration? Is that okay?
Yeah, I take it, Councillor Ashley, that you weren't involved in actually commenting on behalf of Friends of the Earth in relation to this application. Is that correct?
No, not at all.
Right, well, in that case, then, I suggest you make a personal only interest and amend the register to indicate that.
Allows me to talk?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Don't forget to amend the register.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, any comments or questions? Councillor Crick.
Thank you. If I could start off, Chair, if I may, having listened to the explanations so far. I'd like to refer to pages 40 and 79, where it talks about the supplementary housing. And on the 5th bullet point on page 40, Seren have also provided me with the size of the units, and it seems that the intermediate units are very small, e.g. 3-bedroomed house is equivalent to a DQR compliant 1-bedroomed flat. I understand DQR is the design quality rating of Welsh Government. Whilst SPG states intermediate units should be the same size as market units, this does seem very small. There is reference then again on page 79 to this, where it says the house types that the applicant is offering for the low-cost homes, which are the intermediate units, are smaller than the socially rented units, which are DQR. I wonder if Helen could explain that to those of us who are here present, so that we really understand what this means, because it seems very strange that the houses which Seren is going to be dealing with are actually smaller than the social housing.
Yes, Seren are the nominated registered social landlord for this site. They'll be not only taking over the intermediate units, but also the socially rented. Welsh Government give guidance on the design requirements of socially rented houses. These include not only the sizes of the properties, but the types of fencing, garden areas, and so on. In this case, socially rented houses are DQR compliant. The intermediate units are more comparable to the applicant's market housing rather than the DQR socially rented properties. Our policy does state that intermediate units should be DQR compliant unless there's justifications for them not to be. Just to give you some examples of floor areas, the two-bedroomed socially rented property has a floor area of 835 square feet. The DQR rented properties are quite generous in sizes in comparison to market housing today. The two-bedroom intermediate properties, the equivalent type of property, is 590 square foot. So that is smaller than the DQR. However, the two-bedroomed market house type that the applicants are offering for general sale, they are also 590 square foot. So they are comparable to what they are offering for private sales. Whilst we would prefer the properties be DQR, in this instance, the justification put forward by the applicant is that their strategy for this site is to put as many units on the brownfield site as possible to lessen the impact on the ecologically sensitive part on the future phases. They've stated that if they did increase the size of the intermediate units to be DQR, this would reduce the number of properties available for affordable intermediate sale, and they would also be more expensive for Sarah to purchase. On this basis, because of the justification in terms of the maximising the brownfield site and the fact that they are comparable to the market housing proposed, we feel it's acceptable in this instance. There is it's not very clear in these SPG in terms of the standard expected of intermediate units. The socially rented is very clear. I understand from my forward planning colleagues that a report is going to be presented to full council in December to review the SPG, and they are going to be looking at that issue as part of that process.
So if I may come back, so you're saying that this will be looked at in December. We're now in November, possibly agreeing something that will be changed in December. So obviously future applications will be very different from this one. Is that what you're saying? If the recommendations are such that it should be the DQRs, which are designer quality ratings, being followed rather than what's been suggested here?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know what the forward planning are going to be. I'll pass you over to Adrian, if you can explain a bit more in terms of what your proposals are.
Yes, as part of the AMR that Council agreed recently, we picked up we needed to change the affordable housing ask in certain areas and do that by reviewing the SPG affordable housing section. And I think since we wrote the SPG, we've noticed some things that we could write better. There's a couple of areas where we've got no explanation what we're going to do. We're going to pick that up. I think this issue, I think you've got to bear in mind that even when we review it, there'll still be an allowance for the intermediate not to be DQR standard. I think Helen's given the reasons. And I think the other thing to note as well is that the bigger the house, the more expensive it is for the purchaser. So actually it might be, let's look at it. If you look at the people on the help to own list who buy these, they've got very limited money. And it might be they will be able to buy a smaller house because it will cost less than a DQR house. So actually it does meet the needs of the people on the help to own register. I mean, it is a balance, and I think Helen's explained why in this case we consider that the developers have explained why in this instance they're not looking for DQR.
It just seems, and I'm sure members will agree with me, that there's a tremendous difference between social housing and housing that's available to buy.
There is a difference, Councillor Crick, I think, but that's probably a function of having an affordable housing provision within the LDP, which allows us to seek 30% within the Cwmbran area, for example. And from a developer's point of view, I suppose the bigger the affordable housing, the more difficult it is for them to actually turn a profit. So, and the more difficult perhaps it is for would-be buyers to buy. So it is a balance, as I think Helen and Adrian have indicated. The recommendation is that we approve with conditions, including Section 106 agreement, and no doubt those sorts of issues could be continued. We could continue to discuss those within the context of that. But essentially, if you want 30% affordable housing on any particular project, then you can't expect mansions on that basis.
I'm not suggesting, Brian, that you can. I think I do have some reservations, which I'd like cleared up by housing at a later date, perhaps, the impact of this with bedroom tax, for example, because you're looking at much smaller room sizes and it could create problems and inequalities. The other thing I'd just like to raise, we were talking about the road crossing and the situation there. Where exactly would children have to cross on Green Meadow Way to get to the schools? And how safe is that going to be at peak times during the day?
Sorry, Councillor. Children will cross where the crossing points are. There are dropped curbs at various locations along Green Meadow Way. The point for members to remember, I think, is that we have negotiated, I think it was £77,000 worth of traffic calming along the frontage of that site to link the front of the site down to the existing traffic calming, thereby reducing vehicular speeds along the frontage of that site, which gives a much safer environment for all. And that's where I think that amount that we secured in lieu of the secondary access is a good thing for residents and for children crossing the road at front in that site. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Crick, any further comments on that? No. Okay, Councillor Ashley.
Right, a couple of things. I did want to come back to this business of the getting across the road, because anybody that's ever used the bus up there, number 5 and number 6, go round one way and go round the other way. Getting across the road, you have to run for it. It's not desirable if you actually try it. You see what I mean? The one way out of it, without spending a lot of money, would be to put something like a pedestrian refuge in the middle. Because you've got Blenheim Road School down there, which we went to look at before. I only make that suggestion because it would be a much cheaper option, more desirable option than trying to put a pedestrian crossing in there. The other thing I noticed, because we did, and when we were standing up the other day, you could see cars going up there quite considered fair rate of knots in terms of pedestrian calming methods. The other thing I wanted to raise, because I've been up and down a few times, essentially it's the same route up and down there to go to the community farm, and the natural way of going up there, if you're looking at safe routes, active travel type issues up to that site, and there's going to be a considerable number of people there, probably not wanting to use their cars all the time, walking, cycling, etc., is down over Green Forge Way, isn't it? So I wonder whether there's any improvement they could to that path. It's a big path most of the way, but once it comes at the top there, it's how you access there. Because St Giles, although it's desirable, is quite St Giles Road Lane or whatever you call it, it's quite steep in places and doesn't naturally go down to town. It's just there's alternative routes, and if we could get that upgraded, that would actually be quite desirable. Because at the moment, Green Forge Way is not a cycleway.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the St Giles Road, because that is quite a good route down into town, actually, for all sorts of for cyclists and for walking down into town. When we looked at where you mentioned the refuge island, we looked at that, and we looked at providing that near to where the bus stop locations are. There's a bit of a problem there in that you can't walk to the one bus stop because the path doesn't meet. So what we've done is we've come up with a preliminary design where we can stagger the bus stops so that we can just change the one bus bay and then get some footway links into the bus bays. I take your point regarding Green Meadow Way itself and having to sprint from one side to the other. But I mean, it is a sort of a conventional width road. It's not substantial, and the traffic calming will help with people that may want to cross at various locations along that particular road. As far as Green Forge Way was concerned, there is a footway system along Green Forge Way, and it's difficult to see where you could get some improvement, but I will take a look at that, because we have this contribution, and it's a balancing act to make where that money is spent. But believe me, we will look at that particular area, directly fronting that site. Pedestrian links to bus stops is really important, I think. Getting decent footways fronting the site is important. The wider aspects, we need to consider it, but they won't be so high in the ranking of what you do, because we like to look directly fronting the site.
I only make the comment was, if you actually look at where people go down over there, they tend to go down Green Forge Way rather than in St Giles. It's open, it's safer.
Anyone else? Councillor Parish? Sorry, Ron.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. Can I ask the Highways Officer about the secondary access that you would have liked to have seen? Now, you've negotiated for this traffic calming instead of. Are you satisfied that that is the best option?
Thank you, Councillor Parish. I've made it quite clear all along that I would have preferred a secondary access to this site, and I was in the position that I had to ask myself, was this desirable, or was it absolutely essential for this development? And I came to a decision which I think which I know is the correct decision, that it's not absolutely essential for this development. But what I felt was essential was that traffic that would have come out of the secondary access and would have gone down Green Forge Way. I needed a mechanism for traffic that came out of that site to go down Green Forge Way, hence where the traffic calming came in. So on balance, my view is that it was a correct procedure to push for the secondary access, but if you didn't get it, which sometimes we don't, the alternative was satisfactory.
So there's absolutely no way there could be another access and the traffic calming?
That's correct, Councillor Parish.
Well, can I just add, it is possible, of course it's possible, but at the price of something else. I think you'll find within the sort of 106 discussions, we would lose something else as a consequence of doing that. And whether or not it could, at this late stage, actually be incorporated into a plan which is to have the number of houses it's currently got, is also debatable. So if you were minded to think in terms of insisting on that, then I think you would have to refuse the application. And the advice from the officers, including Paul, is that this is a satisfactory solution. But it is up to members. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. This is for you as well, Paul. It's quite obvious why the developer doesn't want a second access. He can get more houses in there, that's quite obvious. I mean, that's the only reason he doesn't want it there. But with the second access, would have been at the top of Green Forge Way, it could have come onto a roundabout there, could have alleviated on Green Meadow Way here. They put £70,000 in. They don't mind that because they're going to get more houses anyway. But my worry again is infrastructure. Wherever we go in this borough, Llantarnam will be coming up, hundreds of houses on there, and we just don't put anything in our roadways. On Green Meadow Way, we won't be having a crossing because you'll have drop curbs. There's going to be a lot of traffic coming out there in the mornings. There's 200 odd houses per cars. Not all the children will be walking. Some will be in the cars with their parents, but there will be children walking through there. So when they're coming out of the development there, they're going to come to the whatever drop curb they got. They're looking at the development, where traffic's coming from that way, traffic coming up and down. I do worry of children crossing there, and we're not all we're providing is some calming bumps or whatever's going to go in there to slow the traffic, but there's a lot of traffic going to be there in the morning with the children. Again, not all the children are going to be walking, some will, some won't, but my worry is the traffic on that road, and where we could have had another access going out onto the top of where the roundabout is, would have been much, much better to alleviate the traffic coming out that road, and would have taken a lot off the development itself.
Thank you. Anyone else before Councillor Crick? Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Evans, then Councillor Crick.
Chair, I've read the report and I've listened to what has been said here today, but one of my concerns really about this is parking, and you talk about parking for visitors on this site, where you say that you've got one parking space for visitors for 5 properties. You know, we have this all over the borough and in every planning committee. You know, as well as developing houses today, I am sorry, but houses attract people, attract cars, and cars, I am sorry, are the biggest problem today. And if we haven't got enough spaces, you know, this is where loads of things can develop from this. So I just think sometimes that developers don't look enough at what a development is going to bring in. And one of the main issues throughout the borough is parking. And I see what the report says, but I think for the amount of houses there, you know, parking is going to be another major, major issue.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. And same theme as Barry, really, as it relates to parking, and comments made by Mr. Mussel about the overspill because of the lack of visitor parking. Paul mentions that it wouldn't be practical for people walking from that area that Mr. Mussel referred to because of the length of the walk, but there, in the diagram shown, there are certain areas where you can get access to that lane much easier, rather than what you were saying, Paul, there would be quite an extensive journey. So I wonder if Mr. Mussel's suggestion of putting double yellow lines there could be incorporated to stop that situation arising.
Yep, if we can have Paul's response on the parking issues.
Members will note my previous comments on car parking. There's not a lack of visitor parking in this particular site. That's been said in my comment Mark 1. It's been said in my comment Mark 2, but not in my comment Mark 3. If you look at this site, this is a new development site, and this links in with Councillor Taylor. I can understand that we got car parking problems in the borough. There's no doubt about it. You go into residential streets, and there's one space per one property, and that is it. If you look at our new residential sites and the sites that we've developed over the last 20, 25 years, those sites are relatively good, because what we get 2 or 3 car parking spaces on the property. We get visitor spaces designed off-street, and we also get visitor spaces on-street because the roads are wide enough to enable that to happen. So with a combination of all this off-street, on-street and on-site car parking that we get in new developments, there's never much of a real problem. Notwithstanding, I understand what Councillor Taylor and Councillor Evans are saying, is that we have problems in the borough with car parking, but that primarily is not within new development sites, because we ensure that they are to today's current standards, the parking provision. Well, there may be some shortfall here or there. It's balanced by a make-up somewhere else on site. So my view is that there's not a real shortfall of visitor car parking on this site, because you take visitor car parking as on-street and off-street. And it won't, my view is it won't be in Salisbury Court because it's so much of a detour. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Evans.
Can I come back there? I explained about the detour earlier when I spoke, Paul. There isn't a detour really, because there are outlets there so people can come through. So I don't accept that argument. But I would go back to my original request. Do you think it's feasible to put the double yellow lines there?
Sorry, Councillor, I can't put that one. If you put double yellow lines in areas, what you do is you prevent existing visitor parking and residence parking on those streets that you put it on. So say, for instance, you looked at Salisbury Court, you wouldn't just tend to put a small length of double yellow line in there, you'd look at Salisbury Court as a whole. And then that would get rid of visitor parking and residence parking within that street for something which I don't really believe is going to be the problem. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Crick.
Thank you. I'd like to come back to the access, if I may, point. Where the green areas are either side of the road are the water storage tanks underneath, aren't there? Is there any possibility, have you considered a mini roundabout onto the road so that it will be easier for the traffic to turn right or left?
You could consider that, but a priority junction is always the better type of junction. The junction that is there is the best type of junction that you can have. The TA shows that you don't get significant queuing or you do get turning movements at that junction, but it never becomes congested. And a priority junction is always the best type of junction. Where you tend to put in mini roundabouts is where you're doing say for instance you've got an accident alleviation scheme. You may put one there. We put one down on the bottom of Green Meadow Way, and that showed up as an accident study site. But this type of junction is common throughout housing developments, and it is the best form of junction that you can have. Thank you.
Anyone else? Does anyone want to move a motion or an amendment or anything? Councillor Parish.
Yes, I'd like to propose an amendment to this application that a second access is incorporated into the application, cited where the Highways Officer has suggested.
Well, first of all, is that seconded? Okay, it's sort of on the table, but I have to advise what I did indicate earlier, that if you are minded to propose a second access, the best way of proceeding is to refuse the application. Perhaps indeed the only way of proceeding is to refuse the application, and that being your reason.
Okay then, I'll withdraw it and we'll go for a vote. If you say it's the only way, if an amendment isn't possible.
I think you need, before we get to a vote, we'll have a little discussion about the proposal, which I take it you are moving refusal of the application on the grounds that there should be a second access. Yeah?
Well, I can't see why we can't make an amendment to have a second access.
Yeah,
and go from there.
It's a refusal rather than an amendment. And I'm going to allow Richard to talk about that. But I want to be clear that just moving an amendment isn't actually, I don't think, going to take us very far forward. So refusal is procedurally a better way of proceeding if members are minded to insist that there be a second access.
Thank you, Chair. I just think in terms of this whole scheme has been developed around a single access. It's been designed around a single access. Another access on there would mean a fundamentally different scheme. So it isn't an amendment as such. It's a totally different scheme. So we would probably be we would be starting the whole application process again with a different scheme, new consultations, etc. So it isn't possible, in my view, to simply amend the scheme. It would be fundamentally different. So I think members need to bear that in mind if they go down that road.
Okay, but the way I've seen things and heard all the arguments, I think a second access would be far, far better, in my opinion.
Thanks. I understand what it is you want to achieve. I think what I'm saying, what Richard is saying, is a mechanism to try and ensure that your wishes can be fulfilled in an appropriate manner. That's not to say I'm in favour of your proposal, but it is procedurally I want to be clear on that. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. Can I just ask, was any consideration given, I know you've had a lot of discussion about this plan, was any consideration given to having the access onto the roundabout rather than onto Green Meadow Way, so that, you know, it alleviated that problem and got the traffic away from that road?
Yeah, that was looked at. It's awful difficult because you've got St Giles Road coming out there as well, and then you've got a 5-arm roundabout, which in itself is dangerous. So we did look at it, Councillor Cameron, and we dismissed it at early stages.
Powell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just wanted to ask from the Highways Officer, because obviously you said yourself that you're happy with it now. If we were to turn it down and told them to come back, you know, would their opinion be that, you know, because of the traffic calming measures, that we don't have a case, really? Just want your opinion on it.
My advice to members would be that a secondary access to this development is not essential. If we went to a planning appeal on it with a secondary access, if we went to appeal, if it wasn't included and they appealed the decision, I think we don't stand much chance. I did stick out for it for a long time, and it was a wish, and it would have been nice to have, but it is not it's not essential to this scheme to have it. And all the guidance, Manual for Streets, DMRB, it does say you don't really need one, but it would have been good. But here we are.
Councillor Craig.
Given that this is the first part of the overall development, when plans come forward for the rest of the site, is there likely to be a second access then? If so, where?
Sorry, because of the topography of the site and the surrounding roads, there was only one place where a secondary access could go, and I was in that location where Helen showed you earlier, which was close to the roundabout. So that was the only place it could really go. It falls away quite significantly. You can't come up from the Cumbran end because it's so steep. We looked really carefully to try and get an alternative as well, which we couldn't. Yeah, we have looked.
Councillor Burnett.
Thank you once again, Chair. I think we've debated this quite well, actually. I've listened to Paul, and I can see he's worked very hard with it. He's gone back and forth and looked at it, and as he said, it's not an unnecessary second exit there. So I'm going to propose that we accept this application, but I want it noted that I do have the worries on the front of that development when the access is there of children crossing and the traffic coming out, and I do want that recorded that I do have great concerns about it. But I will put that recommendation forward that we accept the officer's recommendation.
At the moment, what we've got is a motion to refuse on the grounds of there not being a second access proposed. So you would have to move an amendment. But if it's an amendment which simply goes against it in an opposite way to what's been proposed, then I'm not going to accept it. So you just have to reflect that in your vote. However, it does give an opportunity to other members to consider whether there is an amendment that members might wish to put. Bearing in mind you've listened to the advice that as things stand, refusal is unlikely to get approval when it goes to appeal. So is there another way of dealing with this? And I leave that to your quick consideration as to whether anybody wants to move an amendment. For example, to defer the matter for further discussion with the developer.
If it's possible to move an amendment to defer it,
no, you can't move an amendment to your own motion. Stop. Let's see what Richard says first.
From our opinion, as officers that's been involved in the scheme for quite some time, I think the developer has made it absolutely clear that he's not going to entertain a secondary access. So deferral wouldn't get us anywhere. I think that if members are insistent on the secondary access, I see no other way but to refuse the application. But you have to bear in mind that all the officer advice, the professional highways officer, is saying that that access is not, whilst it might be useful and desirable, it is not necessary to allow the development to go ahead. On that basis, Paul or officers would not be able to defend that position at an appeal situation. So you need to bear that in mind before taking that decision. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I will withdraw the application, and you can vote on the application as suggested.
Sorry, Norma, you're withdrawing your proposal.
Yeah, for the amendment.
Refuse.
To refuse it,
yeah,
yes.
Forget about deferment. You couldn't make a proposal to defer. We haven't had an amendment to defer because no. But if you wanted to, did you want to withdraw your motion? Was that your intention? Your original motion?
Yes, and just vote on it as
well, you need
usually.
the approval of the seconder.
I will withdraw my second.
Okay, well, we're back to square one now. There's no notices of motion before the meeting, so we need someone to decide what it is you're going to flag up for the rest of us to consider. So, Councillor Seaborn, you had your hand up, was...
All I was going to say, Chair, that as Councillor Parish has withdrawn her motion and that the application has already been proposed, I will second that proposal to accept the officer's recommendation subject to the 106 agreements.
So, sorry, you're referring to Councillor Burnett's original, well, what he said earlier, it wasn't original in any sense of the word, but he made the first suggestion, shall we say.
Yes, sir, but that was what was proposed.
So to approve the officer's recommendation subject to the conditions therein. So that's now, we're getting to it now, that's as proposed by Councillor Burnett. Now he's able to propose that because Councillor Parish's motion was still on the table at that time, and you are seconding Councillor Burnett's motion. Okay, right. Now, does anybody have an amendment to that particular motion which they would wish to put forward? I hope not, but it's your decision. No,
Mr. Chairman.
No, you can't.
All I was going to say is, can we put it to the vote?
Well, does any other member wish to speak on the motion which is to approve the application as subject to the conditions? To approve the application subject to the conditions in the recommendations. In your papers. Right. Are you ready to vote on that? All those in favour, please show. we'll have a count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12. Yes. Those against? Amendments? I mean, abstentions? I forget. Amendments on my mind. One abstention. Yes, one abstention from Councillor Parish. Right, well that is approved. Good debate, contentious issue, difficult one, and I think you made your wishes plain, even if we sometimes aren't able to get those through. Thanks. Let's move on to item 6, which I'll find in a minute, which is planning application 15/P/00251, which is removal of conditions 4 and 6 and alteration to condition 5 of a planning permission at 2527 Victoria Street. And Norman's going to say a few words about that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members, they may recognise the site. We have had previous applications which have come to Planning Committee, and we have had site visits. It's the restaurant which was granted planning permission early in 2014 for takeaway use and a retail use with residential accommodation at first floor. Members recall there were issues in relation to the fire escape and the amenity area, or the flat roof at the rear of the property. The application before you is to seek removal of condition 4 and 6, which relate to the use of the flat roof area, and I'll just use some photos of the area. That's the view back to the properties at the rear from the steps you can see going down to the access way. That's the view of the enclosed area from Victoria Street. And here you've got the finish of the current finish of the fence, and what is proposed is to attach a trellis type feature to the top. We're also proposing removal of structures such as this box, but basically what we're saying is we accept that with appropriate screening on the top, that this area could be used for residential amenity. We have had one objection to this proposal. They state that there's issues in potential noise and lighting. With regard to the lighting, we've put on a condition relating to that, seeking further agreement. With regard to noise, well, obviously it's a residential area. There's residential gardens all the way along there, so the use of this space for residential purposes won't inherently give rise to anything abnormal in terms of noise impact over and above the gardens. What we're concerned about is potential screening for the properties on to the rear, and that's what we feel is acceptable through the installation of an agreed screening above what currently exists. In terms of visual amenity, we feel that that's okay. If obviously we've been in this situation before in terms of looking at this issue. However, I would point towards the condition 1 of the recommendation, which effectively means it's quite a tight timescale and regulated timescale within quite a complex condition, which if the owner didn't comply with, effectively he goes back to the position that we approved with the previous application. So inherent, there's an obligation on him to fulfil these requirements, otherwise we go back to the situation as approved previously. And we feel that's legitimate in this situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norman. Any questions? Pam.
Sorry. Well, I was on the site visit when we talked at length about this, and I'm disappointed that now they've basically done what they wanted to do in the first place, and what we put a condition on to prevent them from doing. You know, I've known people get balconies turned down because they're overlooking. Basically, they've turned this into a balcony that is overlooking. And the condition that we said was definitely needing to be put on was that that flat roof was not to be used for any amenity use. They've done it, and it looks as though now we're almost being recommended to approve what they've done. So why did we bother putting the condition on?
I think at that stage, all that was proposed was an enclosure in terms of a safety rail, etc. Now, in terms of, we deal with a number of balconies, etc., and flat roof surfaces, and in those situations where there are neighbouring properties, we do look for screening of up to typically 1.8 metres high on the boundary. This is somewhat set off the boundary. So whilst it's a large area, it is the only amenity space associated with the flats as well. So I recognise what you're saying. In hindsight, perhaps this could have possibly been predicted. However, we're faced with a situation of either taking enforcement action or agreeing a scheme which we feel would overcome the concerns and mitigate any potential privacy issues. If he doesn't comply, obviously, then we return to the situation as approved, and we feel that would allow him the time period to comply. Otherwise, we seek compliance with the original condition.
Can I just come back and say, I'm not necessarily thinking it's terrible. I mean, if privacy issues are taken care of, I understand it. I can understand how they wanted it. What I suppose I'm disappointed with, we were led to believe that if we did do that, it wouldn't happen. And really, I think it was, like you say, it could almost have been predicted. So, an enforcement action isn't feasible.
Yes.
Really.
We sought to control something. Obviously, the owner has ignored that, if for want of a better term, and when we're faced with the situation as it is, and we feel that given the circumstances, then this could be ameliorated satisfactorily. If he doesn't do so, we still got the enforcement position to go back to.
Thank you. Just looking at it, I can't help but wonder, it is a wooden structure, isn't it? How safe is that?
In terms of the structure there, we will be putting a note on in terms of, I think we have put a note on in relation to him establishing that the fence and the means of enclosure will be will be sturdy enough for its purpose. So that is something that would be his responsibility in terms of wind loading, etc. So we are conscious of that, and we'll be advising him of that. In terms of the sturdiness of that, I don't think there's any issues with regard to that at the moment. Obviously, going higher, it does mean that there's a loading issue becomes more apparent, but we will be flagging that up with him.
Obviously, when you look at modern developments where you've got balconies, they're usually the basic structure is metal and firmly encased in the building, attached to the building. That as a wooden structure does not look that safe.
I don't think it is unsafe. There's nothing to suggest it is, but as with all balconies, fences, etc., they need to be properly maintained, and obviously that is the responsibility of the landowner. And I would, we have drawn your attention to the note to the applicant in submitting conditions relating to condition 1. We've stated that it's his responsibility to ensure that it is appropriately fixed to the roof.
Anyone else? Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the recommendations. I'm a little bit that's saying that's saying about removing all items and paraphernalia. It's interesting that it's within saying please do it within 2 months, whereas on the original thing, which the original condition 6 of the previous thing, it says 1 calendar month. So why the change from 1 to 2?
I think it's recognition that we're in the winter period, and we don't think that is an unreasonable period of time but yeah, I acknowledge that it might not appear consistent.
Councillor Taylor.
Chair, I was on this site visit as well, and we were concerned about these, and I think this was all put through when plans were put forward. I got to be honest, I think I couldn't support this because they have gone ahead and done it without the proper conditions, and I think now they're just coming back with this. It was not what the original plans were meant to believe. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry, no.
Just to reiterate, obviously the applicant does have the opportunity to amend any proposal and change any scheme that has previously been approved, and obviously we've got to consider that on that basis. And whilst perhaps it is unfortunate, we've got to consider the consequences then of refusing. But what I would say, in going back, is that if he doesn't comply with what we're proposing now, we go back to the condition 1 enforces what was previously approved.
Okay, anybody else wish to discuss this? You ready to vote? Councillor Seaborn.
I will move the officer's recommendations, Chair, subject to the conditions and whatever Norman has just said.
That is implicit in the conditions that enforcement action would follow, yeah. Councillor Waite, I think, has seconded it. Thank you. And Councillor Constance. Gosh, plethora of seconders. Ready to vote? Yep, all those in favour, please show. That's going to be 12 again, isn't it? And all those against? And Barry isn't sitting on the fence. Well done, Barry. Right. Just as well, might fall down. Right, I don't think they got that at all, did they? No, yeah, never mind. They wanted a good one, really. Okay. Item 7, planning application 15/P/00662, which, my computer is playing up, is discharge of condition 13 of planning consent relating to lighting details at the former playing fields in Lower Race. And Adrian Wilcock will present on this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this locations plan is probably the best plan to show you the sort of setting of the site. This is the former Race AFC site, which was permitted in January for 31 pitches. This is the current Shepherd's Hill site. This is the sort of route of the footway. You'll see this from the report as well. This is the area of the ancient woodland that we talk about, but actually the tree spread comes greater than shown on the plan. This square coming in here is actually the football pitch at the college, and this little bit of squiggly there, that's the car park on the college as well, and you'll see that I'll put that in context when I talk about it later. All right. Before members today is the condition about the lighting, but it's also connected to the location of the footpath. Members may recall in January when they approved the original application that they asked for consideration of this route to be lit. So there's the route from the site up to the college, and there is a link into Shepherd's Hill. Now what's happened, when they've gone away and looked at it, they've realised that the actual footpath is heavily trafficked by agricultural vehicles, and we approved a design which is basically a light tarmac path, and that would be ripped up. So what they're now proposing is to actually not follow the route of the footpath, which is the other side of there's a hedge along here, but to actually, I'll show you later, but come on the inside instead of using that, and they're proposing to basically resurface it. So that's the existing agreed route, and that was the link into the Gypsy site, and as you can see, it actually comes into someone's pitch, so it's not the best location for it. So here we have the lighting details that are before members today, which shows the proposed new route. This hasn't yet been agreed. We're going to deal with this separately as a non-material amendment. We thought it's important to let you know that the route you've agreed is probably going to be different than the one that we probably end up with. But what members asked for was for the consideration of low-level lighting along this route. So you can see here, you can see these black dots. These are proposed low-level bollards that link from the site along the majority of the new route inside the hedge, and it rejoins the public right-of-way here that's now being strengthened. They're now proposing new materials as well to strengthen it so it can take the load of this big agricultural vehicle. Now, as I've just said, there's an ancient woodland here, and the consideration's been given that it wasn't appropriate to put lighting along this section here because of the damage it would cause to tree roots. You can see here, there's the bollards that are proposed. They're 1 metre high, dome illuminated. I think I said it's a 600 deep trench, and about a 500 deep trench would be required for the ducting, for the cabling, which would in effect sever the routes along this section. So what the applicant is proposing is just to light this section here. They're also proposing a new route into the Gypsy site, which is this one. So previously it came in there, and it's there. So really that's before you.
Adrian, any questions? Councillor Waite.
Adrian, you said they are small lighting. How tall are these lights that you?
They're 1 metre high dome illuminated bollards. So there's a bollard and there's a dome on the top. I forgot to say that in the report I would tell you what the ecology officer was said. He's now come back and has said, I can confirm that I am broadly satisfied with both the amended lighting and access proposals. My main concern was the potential impact on the ancient woodland and protected species. The new design for the footpath improvement adjacent to the woodland will reduce potential damage to tree roots, and the bollard-type lighting is certainly more environmentally friendly, therefore limiting light spill. So I think the bollard, basically the ecologist prefers this dome illuminated bollard, rather than, you'll see here, actually within the site, there are sort of 5-6 metre high lamp standards, and that's more appropriate for biodiversity in that area.
I just got a question again, Adrian. Are they vandal-proof? Because I think, because it's in a big area, how are they going to, are they vandal-proof at all, or is there anything that can try to assure us that that it will work?
Well, I've asked this question, and the engineers assure me they're as vandal-proof as any light standard in the council. You can't guarantee that someone won't have a go at them. But I think that engineers have said, look, if you look at it, these things are not normally vandalised as much as people envisage, and I should really bear that in mind. So that's what they've told me.
Okay, anyone else? got any questions or comments? This is what we asked for, and the only thing is that the ancient woodland stretch of the footpath won't be lit, but that's adjacent to the football pitch in the college anyway, and you're getting back towards lit areas that way. So hopefully that'll do the trick until someone finds a way of destroying them. But, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment about the unlit area, and you saying, Adrian, about the damage to the roots of the trees. Have we looked at any alternative lighting there, the solar lighting? No?
There actually is lighting in that area. At the top here, there's a street light that perfectly shines down the route. There's actually a double spotlight that shines into the car park. If we go back to the previous drawing, I think it's probably easy to explain on that. Can you see here, there's the car park. There's actually a standard there where I'm sort of flicking. There's another one there, and there's actually a bollard. So there's enough incidental light, I think, to light it as much as the bollards would have. So once they've built it, put the new path in, it should have incidental lighting casting onto this section anyway. But there's a really good street light here at the top that's sort of perfect for the top end.
Glad you explained that, because I had the impression it was in total darkness for a certain route.
No, and I think, as the Chairman alluded, this actually is the car park for the college. Right. That light's on normally between 10 and 12, depends on the time is set, I think, but that's roughly when it goes off. And it's on most times because of security as well. So.
Thank you, Adrian.
All right.
Anyone else ready to move something, folks? Councillor Wade? Sorry. I've got to allow Councillor Constance.
I was just going to say I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Is that seconded? Councillor Wade? Fine. You ready to vote? No amendments? Hang on. Wait for it, as they say. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much.